Hello and welcome to this episode of the SprocketPod. My name is Cameron Collins. For those of you who don't know me, I am the community manager for Sprocketeer. I am also a revenue operations strategist with RevPartners. I've got my co-host Mark Lerner. Mark, go ahead and give your plug.
Hey, Mark Lerner, Director of Growth Marketing at DealHub. We are a native CPQ integration with HubSpot and other CRM providers. Also, a member of the Sprocketeer community.
And today we have Jonas on. We're going to be talking about duplicates, something that affects everyone, no matter how large or small your business is. If you're using HubSpot, you have definitely run into situations where you're dealing with duplicates. Jonas, go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Jonas. I'm based in Belgium, in Ghent. I've been co-founder of Qualify, which is a HubSpot plugin to manage duplicates more effectively and to simplify the duplication, in short. And before Qualify, I was also a HubSpot RevOps consultant, ran into duplicates very often, and then decided to build a solution to tackle them more efficiently.
I'm sure that although we could spend probably the first 10 to 15 minutes all griping about duplicates for anyone who has used HubSpot, we'll skip that part because anyone who has an instance knows that duplicates are painful. And obviously, Jonas, you are the king of managing and working with duplicates. I'm keen to hear your take on what some of the primary reasons that people find themselves frustrated in managing their duplicates and why they turn to solutions like Qualify for this.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what we see with a lot of customers is that people very often neglect data quality and data hygiene when they start out using HubSpot. And that takes usually a couple of months before they start realizing, oh, we do have a problem. We're sending wrong information to the wrong person, or there are multiple sales reps working on the same contact because they're in the HubSpot system multiple times. And then people realize that they have a problem. They want to do like a bulk cleanup and then have an ongoing process in place to manage duplicates more effectively.
And when it comes to duplicates, to your point, data hygiene, super important. And it tends to be one of those things where, in my opinion, in a lot of instances, we don't typically think about it until it's too late. So if you have 2,500 contacts and you don't have a process in place for managing data hygiene, it becomes a lot harder to start to clean things up as opposed to creating a process for managing it from the beginning. I know that
Exactly.
there are a ton of things that get affected by duplicates, but what are some of the key things ranging from just reporting inaccuracies, marketing attribution? What are some of the key things affected by having dupes in your account and having poor data hygiene?
It's definitely, like, I think most importantly, it's the customer experience. You're probably losing business and losing money because you have duplicates in your system because they're treated differently. Like you can have a customer signing up through another email address and then like they're handed as a new lead and they're like, hey, but I've been a customer for you for a long time. Why don't you know? So I think that's the most important one, like making sure that you're, yeah, just not losing any business. Next to that, it's efficiencies of your sales team, of your customer facing team, so that they're not working on different records. Like the reason why you purchase and implement HubSpot is to optimize your processes. And you need good data and you need good contact records in order to optimize your follow up. Because if you only have half of the information on a specific record or company, then you're not able to follow up correctly. So it's like efficiencies is definitely a second one. And then as you mentioned, like reporting, if you're reporting on contacts or company objects, yeah, and you have duplicates, you're inflating your numbers. So reporting is definitely another reason why you should avoid duplicates to have more accurate reporting.
Jonas, I want to get an idea for the reasons companies or people might avoid dealing with duplicates. I know that one of the things I see is there's this diffusion of responsibility. There's a bunch of duplicates, but you don't want to delete something because you don't, it's somebody else's. And so you just, and that just compounds by multiple people over time. Is that something that kind of exists across all companies, or is it just something I do?
No, it's indeed a common thing. And therefore, I always advise to start with defining what a unique record should be, because that also is different across different portals. And as long as you don't have clarity, like for example, duplicate companies, how do you deal with parent-child relationship? Like bigger organizations, do you merge them all into one organization, or do you keep the separate offices or locations as separate companies? That's a question that you need to solve internally and that you need to have clarity on before you can start the duplication process. Because otherwise, I don't know, we don't know what to do. So I think it really starts with defining what's a unique record in your portal, and then setting ownership. It's a shared ownership between the CRM admin and also the teams, because I don't think very often as a CRM admin, you're able to merge all duplicates, especially in bigger portals where you have bigger commercial teams working. Then it needs to be a shared responsibility. But we'll look into that later on when we see the different merge options.
That's an interesting point to mention because as an admin, I can attest to the fact that I am always going to be hesitant to delete records, even when I know with near 100% certainty that they are duplicates and they should be merged. Really, at the end of the day, someone else is responsible for the relationships, the people,
Yeah.
the companies, etc. And so for me to go in and even merge a duplicate that I know is a duplicate, it feels like I'm stepping in someone else's area. And having a process for having these merged automatically helps to remove that burden of whose responsibility is this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that psychological phenomena of diffusion of responsibility where everyone assumes someone else is doing it and then no one does it. And that a lot in a lot of things, but especially if you're in a company you work for, not only do you assume someone else has responsibility, but if you take responsibility, something goes wrong, then it's on you.
Yeah.
But not.
And that's really a thing. And the how it's now set up in HubSpot, like by default, where it's a bit hidden, the duplicate management solution, you won't have sales reps, customer facing roles entering that functionality and then searching for duplicates and starting to merge them. So that was one of the main experiences that I had as RevOps. I wanted to show the duplicates right in the face, and that's actually one of the features that we added to our plugin, Qualify. So I can quickly share my screen and just show you how we just put it in the face of the reps that are interacting with company records, for example, where you have it here on the right-hand side as one of the cards where we show you the suggested duplicates for the specific record. And then it's very easy for customer-facing roles just to merge on the go or highlight like this is not a duplicate. Because very often, like you said, as a CRM admin, you don't know or you don't want to interfere with the process, Cameron, like you said. So this enables teams to do it themselves and also to do it in a very easy way on the go when they're interacting with records where it's relevant, which is one of the key features of our product and things that people are loving, especially when they want to distribute the merging in the different teams. Would this be relevant for some of your customers as well, Cameron?
It definitely would. And ultimately, there's nobody that's going to say duplicates are cool. No one's going to argue that duplicates are helpful for an instance. They're always a nuisance. Whether you're talking about marketing attribution, I have companies that I've seen, for example, where you set up a call rail integration and somebody calls in, an existing customer calls into a company and call rail creates a new contact using the phone number, for example. And now you have a record with a recording and a phone number, and you have a separate record for an actual customer, and the two aren't aligned. And so if you go, for example, into the call rail record, you're not going to know that's an actual live customer, and you can potentially listen to the recording and sort it out. But now you're at risk of, to your point that you made earlier, hurting a relationship because the two pieces of information aren't tied together automatically.
That's a very common use case and a common source for duplicates. Integrations is one of the main sources. Call integrations for sure, because they very often are only able to send you the phone number, which makes sense as well. And then if the phone number is not formatted correctly, they'll create duplicate records of the same contact or company. Or if you don't have their phone number already in your CRM, which is not very likely if you log a call, but still it can happen, then you're creating these duplicate records, which could be easily merged as well if you're able to identify that the phone number exists. Could you even do this automatically?
And ultimately, duplicates are bad CRM data. It's bad hygiene. But I think we have to go back and remember that ultimately your CRM is representative of real world data and information. And so in reality, you can't have two of the same person. You can't have two of the same company. And so when we think about duplicates, it really is just a huge problem for companies. And you touched on parent-child relationships, and I'm curious, Jonas, to hear your thoughts on how parent-child relationships and duplicates really come in and start to affect one another.
Yeah, that's a very good question because that's again the definition of what is a unique company. So if you have multiple, if you're selling to Amazon, for example, they have different business units, different locations. Do you sell to Amazon as like a general enterprise? Then very often you just want to have one record of Amazon in there. But if you're selling to multiple locations or multiple entities of Amazon, then very often you want to keep the separate companies and you want to link them to each other with parent-child relations, for example, or even custom associations if you have branches or locations with retailers. So there you need to define first how you want to organize and structure your companies. And then based on that definition, you will have a merging strategy that is more clear. If you have the same company name and maybe different location, then you don't need to merge. But if you have, it really depends on your situation. I don't know if you have experienced that as well already, like how people are dealing with different locations, branches, if you use custom associations or if you use the default parent-child relationships.
I've seen it handled multiple ways, and I think different companies will have a different philosophy for how they want to handle it. But I know that for a data hygiene perspective, I think the most important thing a company needs to do first off is write down what the rules for their business are and then document how core hygiene is going to be handled. So if you have, for example, duplicate company records, which I've seen exist in HubSpot for a multitude of reasons, but one common example is you reach a certain association limit on a record, and so you want to bypass that and you do it by creating a duplicate company. And especially older accounts that had lower association limits in the past are going to have this more commonly. But if you have two company records and association limits, HubSpot will actually throw an error and it won't let you merge it natively.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually have to use a workaround solution to solve that.
Yeah, that's one of the issues that we run into sometimes is that you, especially now with the new custom associations and where you can create custom associations with their own specific limits, is that if you try to merge and the merged records is not in line with the rules that you set for the custom association, then you won't be able to merge. So therefore, you need to first adjust the association limit or the actual association before you're able to merge. Which is something that we're seeing more and more often as one of the issues that customers run into when they do bulk merges, especially.
It's an interesting point. When you talk about duplicates, most people immediately will assume contacts or leads or whatever. But in a world where there are many custom objects, there could be all sorts of duplicates, and then those associations are wrong, and you have to go all the way down the line. It gets pretty complicated. That complexity a challenge that you've been handling, or is there a certain point where it's just too widespread?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think for now the main problem is really the association limits if you do a lot of merges, because and the fact that it's irreversible a merge, and especially the associations that you change are irreversible. There's no way to track, like even HubSpot can't reverse this. It looks like they're going to update their API, their merge API, and probably also their functionality later this year, which might enable more functionalities in reversing merges. Because you can try to import the merged companies, for example, that can be done via workarounds. But importing the associations as well as reinstating the associations, that's currently not possible. So that's the trickiest part, the associations and the activities that are linked to it. But it's very, sorry, I want to come back to something that you said, Mark, and also Cameron, is like the contacts. You mentioned like contact is a physical person and should be unique in HubSpot, but that's not always the case for everyone. And initially, HubSpot didn't start out this way because the email address is like the default unique identifier for your contact. So whenever you're a contact and you sign up with 2 different email addresses, then you're 2 different contacts for HubSpot, which kind of makes sense from their initial marketing automation point of view and like email marketing, because you have different email addresses, different subscription types, so you can target them differently. But then when you add sales into the picture, it changes a bit, in my opinion, where you want to work on a physical person. I don't know how you think about that. If in some cases you want to keep a unique email address as a unique contact, even if it's the same person.
Yeah, that's a really actually interesting thing to think about, because, for example, person can have multiple emails, they can have multiple phone numbers, and in HubSpot you can have primary email, secondary email, or you could have 2 separate contacts with separate primary emails,
Mhm.
but then an association label that says like same person.
We
And
we had those
I don't know
cases.
what the best route here. That gives me pause. Mark, I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I had a previous company that we had a free trial motion, and for every free trial, it created a new record in HubSpot. And people would make multiple trials with different email addresses. And this created a problem because we needed to track those trials as their own objects as well. So I can't quite remember. I think that what we ended up doing is creating a free trial object, and then we would just it wasn't a perfect solution. It was a big problem because people would 6 months ago would sign up, let's say with their business email, finish the trial, then come back 6 months later with a Gmail account and do a different trial, and you have to track metrics on their activity throughout the 30 days for product-led growth tracking. So it couldn't be merged. It had to be a unique thing. And it was a challenge.
So, and actually, this is a really interesting scenario. If we think about the free trials, and anyone who's registered for a free trial, which is all of us, will know that you can always just put in a new email and usually get a new trial experience. And it makes me think about the few companies that will tie free trials, for example, also to phone numbers. Because now, for example, I might have 10 email addresses, but I generally have one phone number, barring going into Google Voice and generating more. It's a good secondary way to regulate real world data representation, I think, in your CRM.
Yeah.
And Jonas, I'm curious to hear your take on this.
Yeah, for sure. But then, you come into conversion optimization and marketeers wanting to get more leads. And if you add a phone number in a form, then usually that will decrease. However, like you said, it leads to higher quality. And as a sales organization, you're able to call them directly. So it's a bit of a balance versus like the volume. But then on the other hand, like losing some volume, but then having higher intent and phone numbers to uniquely identify them and to contact them directly. It depends, which is very often an answer that we need to give as RevOps, right? So, but Mark's case is really interesting. I think you see it very often, like you have this contact, and initially it was not, I think, meant as like a physical contact, but now, if you're working on it from a sales point of view, it makes more sense to have it as in most cases, as a physical contact, and then use another object indeed to track the number of leads or trials that you're generating. I think the lead object that HubSpot introduced could also be used for that nowadays.
Yeah, this was definitely before the leads object existed.
Yeah.
And so I know that what constitutes a record, or shall we say a real record in a CRM instance, can vary. So if we go back to the example with the free trial, you might have one person with 10 emails, and now you have 10 records, which technically are not exactly duplicates, but they're also maybe misinformation. And this then gets into the notion of a primary key. And so for those who aren't maybe familiar, Jonas, I don't know if you want to give an overview, but let's talk a little bit about why having a primary key is helpful for deduplication or even necessary, and whether or not it should be emails or maybe something else like a phone number.
Yeah, like the primary keys will help you when you do imports or when you do integrations to use it as an alternative unique identifier for your contacts or for your companies to avoid duplication. I think a good use case is, especially now that HubSpot is focusing more on customer success as well, where you have portals or customers of HubSpot that are connecting HubSpot with their backend system or with their SaaS application or e-commerce platform, for example. And then in those platforms, you very often have a unique identifier, which can be used and can be pushed into HubSpot. And generally, you want to mimic or you want to copy the structure that is available in your back office system into HubSpot. And then you use a unique identifier instead of the email address to make sure that you can copy that structure over.
So I think if we think about maybe a real world example and thinking of this on the fly, so both of you let me know if this doesn't sound right, but if you think about a company that sells vehicles, maybe
I
like
have a pretty good example as well. We can use like our own example, Qualify. It's fully embedded in HubSpot. So meaning that every one of our users, of every one of our portals, we get a portal ID, and that's our unique identifier in HubSpot. So even if a company can sometimes have multiple portals, HubSpot portals, with the same domain, with the same company name, but we'll push them over into our HubSpot account, and we'll treat them as a unique company when they have a unique portal ID as HubSpot. HubSpot is also doing that probably. Like every unique portal ID is a unique company at their end. And what we're seeing, for example, quite often is that a company signs up with their Sandbox account, for example, first, which has a same name, very often a similar domain. And then later on, they sign up with their actual production account of HubSpot. So we get two companies, each with their unique identifier or their portal ID into our HubSpot, and we don't merge them, but we link them to each other. So we know that there are two accounts on our end that are using HubSpot and qualify within HubSpot. So that's a use case that might highlight why you won't necessarily, or why you could use another. You had another ID, Cameron?
Well, and I was thinking about an example where a company maybe sells vehicles, and so you wouldn't necessarily say that a license plate is a good one because license plates can change from one vehicle to another over a period of time, but a good key would be the VIN. And so if we think about sites like Carvana or Kelly Blue Book, where you have people plugging in their vehicle information, a bad key would be to use um, the license plate number that someone might enter. A good unique identifier could be the vehicle identifier number, because that's always unique to that vehicle. And so regardless of the situation, having a primary key that works for your business and whatever you're doing is really important.
Yeah. Do you have a specific primary ID, Mark, for DealHub?
I'm not quite sure. There's a lot of stuff that happens on the back end that I don't get to touch. Yeah, no, so it's a problem. This is also not unique to HubSpot, right? I think when we talk about any sort of database, especially when it has multiple sources, inputs, you come up with this problem. The more data that's coming into it, the bigger the problem.
Sorry, I'm wondering if there are any people who are listening in who have IDs or suggestions of unique IDs that they're using within their HubSpot portals. Might be good inspiration for the audience and for us as well.
I mean, I feel like this is really a perfect use case for AI to be able to flag and potentially merge duplicates. It feels like this is like the kind of thing that AI would be very good at. It's menial,
Jonas.
Analyzing. Hopefully I'm not jumping the gun.
No, but yeah, we could also use unique identifiers in Qualify indeed, and then automatically merge. It's a very common use case. Like user IDs, for example, when people are sending over users into HubSpot, they have a unique user ID, but then their email address changes of the user in the backend system. So HubSpot will create a new contact, and then you can easily merge using the user ID that is unique. But that depends on how you identify your duplicates. So there are the built-in native functionalities of HubSpot, and then there are other solutions, like you can do it in a Google Sheet, or you can do it using third-party apps like Qualify to identify your duplicates.
So let's dig into that then a bit, because ultimately there's two sides of the equation here. One is identifying and flagging duplicates, but then the other is actually managing and merging them. And when it comes to identifying duplicates in a CRM, especially when we're talking about HubSpot here, I know everyone's going to, there's a handful of native solutions. So especially if you have Ops Hub Pro, then you have even more. But Jonas, tell everyone a little bit about what some of the native solutions are, what some of the creative or custom solutions are, and then we'll talk about third-party solutions like Qualify at the end here.
Yeah, I will share my screen as well to make it more tangible. But like the main native solution is this one in HubSpot, where you have like your manage duplicates section. And there you get an overview of what HubSpot identifies using machine learning and AI based on different properties that are populated on these records. And then you could use this to review and merge different records. The issue that some people are experiencing with this is that it's a bit out of your control. So you really rely on HubSpot's machine to identify your duplicates, which is working pretty well generally, but it's a bit hard to prioritize as well on how to prioritize which duplicates you need to merge first. So that's built-in functionalities. Have you used these as well, Cameron? The built-in functionalities for
Yeah,
your
I
customers?
have. And just like you see there, you can do it one by one. You can do it in mass with the checkbox. But what it doesn't do is automate the process, right? So I can go and click the select all and
Yeah,
merge the duplicates, but I'm trusting that HubSpot is flagging the right people and that the duplicates are going to be correct, but heaven forbid any of the data is incorrect, you're in trouble. And B,
yeah,
it's not automated, right? So that's one thing that isn't great about that native solution is it does involve manual entry, which, as the premise of this episode is about, we want to get away from and we want to be able to automate it.
yeah,
Automate.
indeed. But indeed, just highlighting, like this is the not, I don't have OpsHub Pro in this instance, so I can't select multiple records. They have a nice plugin here. So there you would be able to identify, I think, 50 or select 50 records and then merge them in bulk. If you don't, then you need to indeed review them and merge them manually one by one. If you have OpsHub Pro, you could also, and Enterprise, you could also merge using custom code workflow actions, but indeed a developer or some custom coded workflows to merge in bulk. So those are the built-in functionalities within HubSpot. Then you could also do an export of your contacts or companies and try to identify them using VLOOKUPs, but that's usually also pretty time consuming. So we have a built-in functionality where you can build rules, which is very similar to creating lists to identify your duplicates. So you can basically set criteria, like, for example, your company name and city need to match. Then you add the filters. You just add company in the city. I don't know if I'll have any of these. And then you
Does
save
this
the rule.
only work for the standard object?
This only works for contacts and companies at this point, indeed. We'll look into deals and tickets later on. But what we see with deals, I think these are commonly asked, but I think people ask more for duplicating deals. So the other way around, where you need to create multiple records of the same deal. And then there's some other solutions out there like Clone Attack from so there are different other solutions to duplicate records. And we don't do deal duplication at the moment. But this is like how you can set a rule or a criteria to identify your duplicates. And if you would then navigate to your companies, you would be able to select this specific rule and highlight or prioritize your duplicates with the new rule that is just created. I will need to refresh this. And you could also use that rule to later on merge some records automatically in bulk or manually if it's a less strict rule. Like, for example, you have the company name and city, which I just created. And then there's a selection of your duplicates that are identified using this rule. So that's how we try to build a native solution within HubSpot to enable you to identify your duplicates using criteria that you set and that you can define yourself.
And really, just to recap on the beauty of this solution, the alternatives are that you go into the native list and you manually review them one by one if you don't have Ops Hub Pro. If you don't have OPSUP Pro as an alternative, you can export your contacts, run a VLOOKUP, do comparisons, and then merge that way. If you do have OPSUP Pro, then you can either bulk select and merge contacts using the native feature, or you can use custom code to do it via workflow. But none of these options are really plug and play with an intuitive, if the city matches or if the phone number matches, merge. And that's what makes this solution, Qualify, so helpful and so user friendly.
Yeah, that's the goal. It's the first time that you see this, Cameron. It's clear immediately how it works, like how you have a rule, how you can then use the rules in your views, but also in your reports. Stuart Alcompe inspired us for this great zero duplicates dashboard. Because your duplicates are highlighted using specific properties, you can create reports of your duplicates. Like, for example, from which sources are they coming from, when were they created over time, who's the owner, etc. So you can basically create every report because the properties are available. And then next, if you want to bulk merge them, which I will show later on, you could also use these properties to select only a specific selection of your duplicates that meet a strict criteria. So not only company name matches, for example, that would be a loose rule. If the company name matches suggested as a duplicate, that's possible, but then you need to manually review. You should make stricter rules like company name, city, or company name, phone number, for example. So you have a better control and more accuracy of how your duplicates are identified, and those could then be merged in bulk using a workflow action. And the workflow action is also pretty simple. So it's really like merged into your primary record ID. We need to talk a bit about primary records in a minute because there's some confusion very often on primary records. But what it will do is it will basically merge a secondary duplicate of a duplicate pair into its primary duplicate. And then you can define which records you want to enroll. You can do this automatically, setting enrollment criteria. You can manually select records. You can create a list first and then enroll that list in the workflow. So there are different options, and you as a CRM admin have the full control over how you want to merge your duplicates.
Can you set parameters on which of the two records would be the primary one being merged into? So either whichever record's created first or some other criteria?
Yeah, so that's the second setting. It only comes with two settings: how to identify your duplicates, and the other one is which duplicates or which record should be the primary. And as you just mentioned, like the first created, last created are already available. This is very similar to HubSpot's options, where you can also select, if you do bulk merges, which one should be retained as the primary duplicate. And we're developing more functionality because people want to have a bit more control over who is the primary record. So we'll be releasing some updates in the coming weeks to give you more control.
Really kind of tie the three of us together. And Jonas, just to confirm for those listening, this can, again, be automated with the workflow, right? So if two contacts come in and the phone number matches, automatically merge the latest one into the one that was created first, correct?
Yep, exactly.
And again, just really tying, I think, the three of us and what we do in our roles into this solution. There's a lot of instances where, let's say someone is using a service like DealHub for their CPQ. Having duplicates with inaccurate data can really mess up. I'm sure it's not uncommon for you to see that, Mark, where people get frustrated about their quoting process, but really it's not the quoting process, it's just bad data in the CRM.
Yeah, any sort of bad data has really the risks when it comes to having bad data influencing contracts and then revenue recognition further and further down get bigger and bigger. It's just, and then finance gets upset and accounting, and it becomes a whole thing. So the risk in that process is super high. And so it's a big problem.
Yeah, it feels very often like it's a small problem and people postpone it, but it can lose you money. It can impact your customer experience. So you should pay attention to it. And with this, our solution in place that you can automate both parts and introduce it to the team so that they can do it on the go. and you have a process in place to reduce it and to get to zero duplicates. That's like our mission: make deduplication as simple and make sure that people can get to zero duplicates in HubSpot to improve the customer experience. Yes.
And I was just going to add to that, where when it comes to having clean CRM data and clean hygiene, it really does affect every single team and department. And even though your HubSpot admin or RevOps person might oftentimes be someone who's catching the fact that there's duplicates, oftentimes there then becomes a tug of war where marketing is upset because they don't get marketing attribution properly. Sales is upset because now they have to sift through more data, but oftentimes they don't necessarily want to be responsible for the hygiene of it, which can be understandable. But then service can be upset because, again, to the example we used earlier, maybe you have an active customer who calls in and a duplicate record is created, and so now they don't have the full customer profile in front of them. And every business needs to address this and needs to have a solution in place. And if you don't use the native features, then I think it's super important that you use a service like Qualify to make sure that it is addressed and make sure that it is handled.
Yeah, for sure. And like the responsibility, what we see is that most of the time it's the ops person or the CRM admin that is still responsible for orchestrating or setting up the infrastructure to tackle the duplicates effectively and share it within the team. But it's not very often the marketing or the sales organization who's going to tackle it, or the reps themselves. It needs some guidance from a RevOps profile.
And for those who are interested in using Qualify and plugging it into their HubSpot instance, how long on average does it take for admin and users to plug it in, set the rules, and
It depends on the size of your portal, because the initial install can take a couple of minutes until hours for portals with over millions of records. So that's the first install, because all the rest happens like nearly instantly, as fast as the HubSpot API rate limits allow us to go. But then to actually get started, like we have people doing thousands of merges on the same day that they did the installation. So you can get running the same day. You can merge nearly all your duplicates in just one day. You saw me creating a rule. The workflow action is just like one action. It takes an hour or two to get started with it.
a simple service is a good service. When it comes to setting up the rules and setting all of this live, tell me a little bit about the formatting requirements. So if you have, for example, one phone number that uses parentheses, but then another is just the numbers,
Yeah,
will Qualify know the digits are the same, so merge them?
yeah,
Or can you set
that's
sensitivity to that?
that's already built in, where we clean like hyphens, dots, etc. So we capture those mobile phone numbers, they're duplicates. What we still need to do is like country codes, because some phone numbers have country codes and others don't. That's currently in development.
It's absolutely a necessary solution because, again, really the alternatives are you can do VLOOKUP, which really anyone can do, assuming that you have the time to dedicate and the familiarity with Excel. You can use the native solutions, either relatively limited without OpsHub Pro or fairly manual with OpsHub Pro, but still something that can be viable. And so really the alternative becomes using a solution like Qualify if you want to automate it and you aren't planning on using any type of code.
Yeah, or involve the team using the cards. That's also something what we're seeing, like people not necessarily automating it, but just making
Mhm.
sure that the cards are visible for the team, and then the team is managing the duplicates on the go.
Yeah.
How long
And
have you been on the market, on the HubSpot marketplace?
It's a good question. Since February, yeah, almost at 500 installs. So it's going
Wow.
pretty well. Yeah,
Okay.
hopefully next week.
and
So yeah,
He's
for
counting, right?
yeah.
for
Sorry?
users that want to set up Qualify, is we talked about it's very quick to get up and running. What are some of the limitations, whether that's association limits, merge limits, etc.? What are some of the limitations or considerations that most users need to be thinking about when they go to
Yeah,
get it set up?
that's a very good question. I think what's most Important to take into account is we're doing the same merges as HubSpot is doing. So that's general feedback for everyone that's merging in HubSpot. There's some limitations, like you can only merge up until 250 times into one record because they're tracking the merged VIDs or the IDs of the records that you merged into specific records. And there you can only track like 250 records. And if you try to merge again, then that won't work. The association limit is something to take into account, really important. Make sure to adjust your association limits if needed so they can handle the merge. Another one, very often like a misunderstanding, is the concept of primary duplicates. So it's basically the master record where you merge into it. And people very often expect that the property values of the master record are maintained after the merge, but that's not the case. It's in general the last updated property. So that means if you're the secondary record, but your, I don't know, your company owner was updated after the company owner was updated from the primary record, then that specific record or like the company owner of the secondary record will be maintained. Also, if it has been cleared, for example, after the company owner was set. So there's like some misunderstanding on the concept of primary records. That's important to take into account. Yeah, I think those are the most important considerations. And then for our application or to use it correctly is like making sure that you have accurate data and rules in place to capture your duplicates. So therefore, we're also looking into like data enrichment tools, because the more data that you have on your contacts and companies, the better you'll be able to identify their potential duplicates. But those are also things to consider while merging.
Notion of primary records is so important, and I know it's very common for admin and RevOps professionals to forget about those rules, because I think it is oftentimes assumed, in fact, I know it is, because I oftentimes forget about this myself, but it's oftentimes assumed that if I'm merging record A into record B, then just record B gets to keep all the data. And so just making sure that you are thinking about the primary details that are going to be kept after that merge is done. Now, the question I have, is there any type of workaround or solution that if you said, I want to merge into record B, keep record B's information?
Not yet, as far as I know, as far as we know, but it's on our roadmap to look into like the possibilities, because technically it should be possible when you have two records to set some rules or some criteria based on the property values of those records that you first copy, for example, property value over from one record to the other. That could be technically possible. If you do it like via coding, you'll probably be able to do that already. We might add it as a feature as well to give people more control. But this is something that I think 10% of our users are asking for, something like that. So it's not the biggest issue. Another question that about 10% of our users are asking is the Salesforce integration. We should probably mention that one as well. You can't merge like companies when you have the Salesforce integration active. You can merge contacts. That's also the case for our application, as HubSpot also blocks company merges over the API when you have the Salesforce integration running.
Those
yeah,
Those guys.
an extra reason to migrate everything into HubSpot, right?
That's our guy. Jonas, thank you so much for being the king of deduplication. Just want to open the floor to both of you for any final thoughts and comments on deduplication, data hygiene, and just making sure that you maintain data integrity in HubSpot.
Yeah, prefer to be the koala, by the way, as our logo is a koala, because my co-founders spent a lot of time in Australia before we started this. And the koala is the only non-primate who has a fingerprint as well, which you can use to uniquely identify them. Same way as you can use qualify to uniquely identify your duplicates. So
That's
they're the only,
that's deep knowledge of the marsupial family.
Yeah, if we would have a marketeer in our team, we would be able to use that a lot, but we don't. We're just the two of us at the moment.
Primary keys and unique IDs, super important. Just as people have unique fingerprints, so do koalas, and that is what koalas and HubSpot have to do with one another, have to do in common. Jonas, thank you so much for joining us today. Mark, always a pleasure. Just for those who don't know, maybe you're listening to this on YouTube, Spotify, some other platform. Make sure you follow the three of us on LinkedIn: Cameron Collins, Mark Lerner, Jonas De Mets. Follow all of us. Links will be in the show notes to our profile. You can also make sure that you check out our friends, Deanna Gloff and Kyle Jepson. They run the HubSpot admin user group that runs Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Make sure you check that out. And then if you're not familiar, but you liked this episode, make sure you check out previous episodes on YouTube and Spotify. We are on all the platforms. We also run these live on Fridays at 10:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. Jonas, Mark, thank you both for joining. Everyone else, Sprocket on.
Thanks. Thanks
Have a
for
great
having me.
weekend.
You too. Bye.